Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB Bikini Pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. This is a special feature episode that if you clicked play, you are in for a treat, because after meeting this man at the Team Boss Bodies Be Fit retreat, I knew I had to ask him if he would come on this show, because his genuine love for the sport, his passion to support athletes, his really kind spirit made hearing him speak at the event and connecting with him just so enjoyable. And I remember I was sitting there listening to him talk, and I was writing down all these questions in my journal, and I asked like two of them out loud, but I knew I was writing them down with the intention of asking him to be on this podcast. So I'm going to be bringing that to you guys. And I decided to take the chance, ask him. He said yes. And I can't wait for you to hear his heart. And he's been in this industry for over 3 decades. He started out as a competitor himself in Cleveland, Ohio, as a teenager, and stayed involved in the industry, especially after reuniting with someone in South Carolina who brought him back into the industry as a judge. And he has since become known for his Klash Series shows and the work he has done serving the industry as a judge, even judging at the Olympia, mind you. So you're going to want to learn from this guy. Welcome to the show, Joe Pishkula. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. I'm going to tell you what, with an intro like that, I'm going to have you write everything for me from now on. That was amazing. Thank you
That's
very
awesome.
much. You made me feel great. But hello to everybody out there. I look forward to, hearing feedback, of course, from everybody, because I know I'll get a lot of messages and such. But let's roll. Let's have some fun with this today. So I'm ready to go when you are.
All right. Well, normally I kick off this podcast by asking the bikini pros if they've got a ritual before their heel hits the stage. So I'm going to ask you if there's anything you do or think about right before that first athlete steps out on the stage.
What's amazing is, yes, I do have a ritual. And it's so funny because I've said this. I know I said it when we were talking at the retreat, at the Boss Bodies retreat, but I tell people all the time, I go, as a judge, I always have butterflies in my stomach. And that's because I know what the athletes have gone through when they hit the stage. I know how it can be stressful, but I also know you put your heart and soul into something for a long period of time. So my ritual when I sit down at the table, it's so funny. I take my phone, I shut it off, I push it in front of me. I have, every time I sit down at the table, everybody laughs at me. I have a cup of coffee, I have breath mints, I have hand sanitizer, and I have my glasses. And those things have to be in my hands when I sit down. You can call it, what do we call it? Obsessive compulsive or whatever you want to call it. But I have a certain layout in front of me with my paperwork. And from that point, when that first athlete walks out on stage, to me, one of the things I'm always doing is I'm looking up and smiling, because like I said, I know what it's taken to get to that point. So it's kind of fun. I go, and the reason, okay, so I'm drinking the coffee, right? And the breath mint part is kind of a joke, because Sandy and I will be sitting next to each other and I'll go, Sandy, does my breath smell? And she'll laugh and she'll go, no. And I'm like, okay, good. Because, we're talking the whole time that we're at the table, and we're always thinking and moving forward. And, everything is so split second reaction. And it's just kind of fun to sit there and think about, okay, there is a ritual to it. There's I forgot to mention that I also go to the bathroom 10 minutes before a show starts. I don't know why I find that so important, but
10 minutes.
It's 10 minutes. I look at my watch and I go, it's 10 minutes. I get up, I go to the nearest, I always ask the expediters, where's the nearest restroom? And I go to the restroom. See, this is so funny, because I'm saying this right now, and whoever listens to this is going to be like, now I'm watching to see if he gets up to leave 10 minutes before.
They're going to be bringing you mints and coffee too.
and it's always the same mints. They're all Altoid wintergreen mints in a little tin, that not the normal Altoids. They're the ones that are like super duper strength, like they're like so powerful that you can like, you smell like mint everywhere. Like, you know, so, long story short, I go, yes, I do have a ritual. Just like as a competitor, I had rituals, you know, where do you sit before, you know, where are you laying down before you get on stage? Where are you doing this? How much time do you need to pump up? How much, everything becomes a ritual. And that's part of who we are as bodybuilders. I go, I don't think anybody in this sport doesn't have a ritual before they go in the gym, doesn't have a ritual when they're after the gym. I go, our training is usually written in a log or, you know, in a manual that we follow. You know, we prepare our workouts. I go, I think that's one thing about bodybuilding that is relatively common amongst all of us, is we kind of have plans that we put together. I mean, I can remember the first time I squatted 405 pounds for 15 reps. I sat in my car. I was 17 years old. I sat in my car and I just visualized, and I had a picture of my favorite bodybuilder taped to my dashboard.
Who was that?
Of my car. A guy named Tim Belknap, which you guys know, anyone out there right now is going to be like, I don't know who this is. You'll have to go Google him. But Timmy he was one of my guys and one of my heroes, and just amazingly thick and strong. And, you know, so I envision that I sat in my car for 15 minutes, just thinking about that set, just like, okay, I'm going to build up. It's going to be 135, 225, 315, 405, and we're going to hit this for 15. Then we're going to go to 505, or 495, excuse me. And it was always a progression. Your mind knew what your body was going to do. And that's how we thought as bodybuilders. And I think no matter who we are, no matter what our discipline is in the sport, we always think that way. We think in growth. We think in how do we do better? We think in our next meal. You know, when we prep our meals and we sit there and we go, okay, you know, this is the great part. I go, I'm not competing anymore. Okay. But I still think about, what am I going to eat today? How am I going to prepare it? What am I going to eat? You know, when I have a chance, am I going to be able to cheat? You know, am I going to have a cheat meal this weekend? Am I going to go to my favorite restaurant and be able to have, you know, my favorite German restaurant here in Florida that I love to go to, where I'm like, okay, now today I can eat, you know, schnitzel and spatzel. You know, or, you know, my favorite Italian restaurant, I go have lasagna, or, you know, menegotte. I go, this is something that we learn as bodybuilders that we don't forget for the rest of our lives. So it's amazing when I watch our athletes, because I go, that Tupperware that you pull out, I get you. I feel you. I know what you're doing. The broccoli, the fish, you know. So I kind of laugh and I go, everything is a ritual in our sport. And I go, I think we're all to a degree a bit obsessive compulsive, and a bit, and that's not a bad thing. No. I go, I think we're all very rigid and disciplined in how we treat things. And that's what makes a great athlete when it comes to all those different things. So back to where we started this whole little conversation, I go, yes, I still have rituals on everything I do. I have rituals when I get up in the morning. I am up every morning at 4:30, no later than 5 o'clock. And it's so funny. So the other day, speaking of just a little sidebar.
Yeah.
The other day it was about 5 o'clock in the morning, and Casey texted me, and of course I texted her right back, and she's like, why am I surprised that you're up at 5 o'clock on a Sunday morning? And I go, because I'm up every day at 5 o'clock on a Sunday morning. So it's just my thing. There's not a day that goes by I don't really sleep in. I get up every morning at 4:30, 4:45. I start working by 5:15. I make some coffee, let the dogs out, do what I got to do. And then I work every night till 7 o'clock. And that's 7 days a week. But, you know, when I was outside of this industry, I did the same thing. It's routine, it's comfort, it's what we do. So, not to hijack your question, because I kind of just did, and you were laughing when we were off the air, and you said, boy, these two will talk forever. Yes. So yes, I do have routines. I don't think they ever go away. I don't think anybody out there, whether you're competing or not competing, will not have a routine. You will have routines.
Yes.
So
and
I hope that answered the question without going a long way around.
No, I love how elaborate you are. I love that you did that because I had other questions that I'm highlighting as you're talking. I'm like, I was going to ask that. I was going to ask about this. And I think as an elite athlete or as a person who runs a business or has big visions and goals, you recognize the power of routine, because if you do not choose a routine for your life, one will be chosen for you. So you might as well choose one. Even if it requires you to demand more of yourself each day, it will drive you to accomplish what you want, which leads me to wonder, what is it that you are driven by? Like, what are your goals in this industry and why do you want those things?
Okay, so it's funny you asked this because this is a real simple answer for me. And once again, I go, okay, whatever you learn in this sport, you can apply it to everything in life, whether it's your family, your friends, your love life, it doesn't matter. I always go, give what you got and you get something back. So it's amazing. You've heard the story about how do people become millionaires, or how do people become successful in business, or how do they get successful in life? And I go, first off, you got to love what you do. That's number one. I go, if you love what you do, you're just doing it because you have a passion for it. And everything I've ever done in life, I've always said, you got to have passion for it. Doesn't matter what it is, you got to enjoy it. So all those things being said, I go, there's nothing I haven't enjoyed along the way. And, we sat down at the seminar, and I know I'm talking about the seminar a lot because it's stuck in my brain. And there were a lot of great people there and a lot of great energy. And I would highly recommend that anybody who's available next year when there's a Boss Body seminar goes. There's something about positive energy that feeds on positive energy. So there was a question where Kim Odo, who was one of our guest speakers, and Kim and I have been friends for years, he got in front of the crowd and he said, what's your why? And I always look at people and I go, what is your why? So when someone asked me, during the seminar, I sat back, I was quiet. I listened to everybody in the room, and I listened to all the trainers and, people that wanted to speak, and everybody talking about their why. And someone said to me, what's your why? And my response was really simple. It was one word: you. And they looked at me like, I don't understand what that means. And I go, you. I go, and you, and you, and you. And I pointed around the room and I said, listen, if you really think about what we're doing, I go, and this doesn't matter about anything in life. I go, really what matters is the impression you leave behind. Okay, I've been blessed in life 100 times over. Don't get me wrong, life's not perfect. It isn't for anyone. We have problems, issues that pop up, things, family, this, that, the other, parents, spouses, whatever it may be. I go, but the one thing I can always say is, if you really think about it, if you help somebody else, your life will be better. So for me, when I look at people and they go, why do you do this? What's your goal? I love promoting shows. I love the Klash Series. I love doing everything that I do. I love talking to people. But what's most amazing to me is when someone goes, you told me to do this, or you told me to change this, or you said this, or, and they did it. And I go, how did it impact you? And they go, well, I achieved the goals I wanted to achieve. That's why I do what I do. It was a very simple answer for me at that seminar. When someone said, what's your why? Mine is you. I've been blessed in life. I've had great mentors around me. I've had great friends around me, training partners that that just put such positivity in your mind. And don't get me wrong. I tell people all the time, I go, when you want something bad enough, whether it's in work or whether it happens, it does happen, but you have to work for it. So I go, I love seeing people succeed. So that's my why in this industry. And I go, if I leave a small impression on somebody today, I hope that they pay that forward to the next person and the next person. And I go, that's the one thing about bodybuilding that's amazing. You can't be successful in this sport if you're not positive. You can't get under a bar with 700 pounds on your back and think you're going to fail. If you think that, it's over before you even step out of the rack. So once again, these are things that you have to really think about and go, okay, you know what? There is no fail in my mind. Everything I'm going to do is a success. And once again, I look at every athlete that gets up on that stage and I go, I know what you've been through.
Mhm.
I know how hard it is. I know how hard it is to diet when you don't want to diet, when you want to give up, when you want to throw in the towel. And you have other factors in your life that are still beating down on you. So I go, to me, it's all about, when I say the word you, I go, it doesn't matter who I was talking to at that moment in time. I don't even remember who it was who asked me what my why was. But I sit there and I go, that you applied to everybody in that room. And that wasn't just at that seminar. I mean, I go to a show and, you know, we have 200 athletes and I'll sit there and go, okay, you know what? I want you to do better. And it might just be, you might be thinking it's just at this show that I want you to do, or, you know, your next show. But I go, if you really think about what's going on in your brain, you're doing better in life. And if you can learn to compartmentalize and carry that forward into everything, you'll realize how successful life is. I go, and not to brag, I go, but my life has been really, really good. And I've been blessed. I've been thankful. You know, I always tell people that, on a side note, I go, don't chase money. I go, money never, it'll come to you. And money has come to me. I've been very fortunate. Family, you know, different things. I go, you have to really try. And sometimes it's lonely. It's not always easy, but it'll all work out the way it's supposed to. So once again, when people say, what's your why? There's my why. It's a very easy answer for me. And I think, I hope that the impression I left behind after that seminar that we did, the retreat, was everybody I talked to left going, he really does give a shit about us, because I do.
100%. That was,
and that I hope, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say there was no doubt. Like, I have no doubt that that was the case, because you made that so clear. I didn't have the necessarily like courage, or I didn't feel inspired to ask a head promoter or judge on the show before, because I was worried about how that could look, and what about this, and what about that, and then there's other ones. And then just meeting you and talking to you, I felt like, oh my gosh. And I've met with many promoters and judges, but like, you speak life, and you're so genuine, and I can tell like you have so much respect for the athletes and for your job and the work that you do, that I was like, I felt empowered to do it. And that was really cool. And I have no doubt that every person you talk to, because I even would ask the girls after they got feedback from you, how do you feel? How was it? He's so amazing. He's awesome. Oh, yeah. So like, if I don't think you doubt it, but you definitely made an impact and continue to.
Well, and that's all I've ever tried to do for 35 years. I go, listen, as a bodybuilder myself, I'm kind of a block. I mentioned this during, you know, my speech. I go, I was never going to be, you know, I trained with Lee Haney and, you know, worked for him. And he was Mr. Olympia at the time. And we walked in the locker room to pose together. And I went, I'm never going to look like that. I don't have that. But I trained just as hard, if not harder than he did. Pushed just as much weight and pulled just as much as he did. I mean, as a matter of fact, I go, I probably exceeded him on a lot of things in the gym, but I didn't have his structure. And that doesn't matter. I go, at the end of the day, I was making myself the best version of me.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's hard for, you know, we're all competitive. We talk about this all the time. I go, competitive nature, we don't sit down and play a board game to lose. We don't play checkers to lose. Everybody wants to win. I get it. We didn't train our asses off for 12 to 16 weeks. Diet so that, you know, we could walk on stage and get third call outs. Nobody does that. We want to win. That's inherent in our nature. And once again, learning to control that is a whole nother, that'd be a podcast for you and I to have on a whole separate interview, because we could go on and on for about hours on that.
Yeah, I know, we really could. Like, all of our conversations that we've had, you know, from at the seminar to in between, like, I just feel so like connected to you, and I really appreciate your perspective and kind of branching off of that idea, which is like fostering a champion mentality, someone who, at least the way I see it, is like a champion is someone who is willing to put in the work, willing to challenge themselves every day, willing to take the loss and learn, right? Like you have to be willing to learn and take criticism and improve, but also not over identifying with the win, and instead really respecting and loving the process so much that the timeline is irrelevant because they're loving every day. But I want to hear from your personal perspective and experience with what you feel is necessary. Because in a previous podcast, you had said, athletes are always going to have something they can improve on in the sport, and that could be mentally taxing. So I wanted to hear from you, like, what do you think is necessary as far as mentality goes to support progression as an athlete?
Okay, that really, I mean, we try to, sometimes I think people, athletes overcomplicate things. We have picked it, and you've heard me say this in other interviews, we picked a sport that has no end. So it's not like one day we look in the mirror and we go, hey, I'm perfect, I'm done. That doesn't happen. It doesn't matter what level we're at. So the point that you start to have to realize in your brain is my improvement, my goals, my gains, everything I do is going to happen slowly, patiently, and with a great direction and purpose. And as we're a human being, so the machine starts to slow down as we get a little older. And this is something that Trey Bennett, who's a good friend of mine, you had mentioned coming back into the sport from a judging perspective. Him and I have a conversation all the time about this. We go, listen, we're in our, I'm 50, he's 50. Oh God, I can't remember. I don't even remember what Trey is now. He's getting closer to 60. He's in his late 50s.
Did you just say you're 50?
Yes.
I had no idea. I mean, I guess I could have done the math with starting as a teen in the 80s, but like, dang, good for you, Joe.
Well, and so once again, it's a struggle because I go, our bodies, and this is something that's very hard for a lot of athletes to accept. And, I hear this a lot. When is it time for me to step aside? When is it? I go, it's not a matter of how do I say this? It's not a matter of how much you want to not step aside. Sometimes your body will tell you, whether it's through injury or whether it's through being realistic, looking in the mirror, where you go, okay, you know what? I don't look the way I want to look. It's time for me to, but I go, regardless of age, you still have to realize you're trying to stay healthy. That's the number one goal. Number two, you look amazing. I go, everybody who walks in the gym, I say this all the time. I go, I don't care if you walked in the gym and your first time in the gym was when you were 50, 60 years old. You're going to improve based upon your putting effort forth. And that effort is so important in regards to your general health. And I think a lot of times people forget that. And I go, okay, we get hung up on what did I look like when I was 20, 30, 40? Well, guess what? Your body is not immortal. It will start to slow down. I see it all the time in the bikini world where I go, it's very hard to tell an athlete, okay, don't get heavy in the off season, because when your skin stretches, it's not going to spring back like it used to when you were 25. It's just not. Men have the same problem. It's not just bikini. I go, but what you have to realize is you're doing it for yourself. And you do have to realize that you look amazing. I tell people all the time, I go, listen, I can look at myself and go, oh my God, my muscles are so small. My arms were 20 inches and now they're like 16. I go, I was so big at one time. I was so strong. I was this, I was that. I walk on a beach right now and I go, I feel pretty good about myself when I look at most people out there. And I'm not trying to be arrogant. I just go, I'm doing what I can with what I have. And I have to realize I'm not going to be what I was when I was 30 years old. And that's okay. But I'm going to try like hell to keep doing it, and because it makes me happy. And that's our bottom line, is if everything makes you happy, you're doing good. So when someone said to me, when is it time to pull the plug? I go, when you're ready. From a competitive standpoint, when it's time to step away from the stage, you'll know. It's not because you don't look, perfect. It's because when it's time to walk away. And I think a lot of times we sit there and we try to always put ourselves into a perfect world. But I go, if you go to the gym and you try to eat right, you're doing better than 99% of our population, which can't. So, and I shouldn't say it's because they can't, it's because they don't want to. Everyone can. The word can't shouldn't exist in our vocabulary. It shouldn't. My own mother, she's in her 80s, and when she says I can't, I cringe. I just still to this day I get like, it's like nails on a chalkboard to me, because I've never had those words in my vocabulary. To say the words you can't is just mentally starting off right from the point where you're saying, I'm not going to do this. And once you do that, you're sunk. So like I said, Trey and I have this running joke about, we don't want to take our shirts off because, we don't look like we used to. And I go, yeah, but we still look great compared.
We can still take our shirt off. It doesn't. Yeah.
Exactly. But here we are. And let me tell you, Trey was a hell of a bodybuilder. So, and if people out there don't know, Trey Bennett's the chairman of the Carolinas. And I know everybody knows Trey because everybody out there listening has probably either been to or competed in the Junior USA, which he's been doing for, I think, 20 years or something like that. So as the promoter. So I go, everybody knows Trey. He's a little short guy, wears a baseball cap down over his ears. One of the nicest people I know in the sport, and probably one of the running influences on why I came back, besides him and Sandy. Those are my two main, my main influences in what I do. But once again, I've hijacked your question and I keep going on these tangents. So let's get back to where we were here. So
okay,
I don't mean
I have
how my brain works.
I'm like, respect the ramble, because everyone on this show will say to me, like, I feel like I just rambled or went on a tangent. I'm like, I love it. That's why I love having a platform.
This is a running joke with Casey and I, because I always go to her, how my brain works. And she laughs and I go, we get on the phone and an hour and a half later, she's like, I got to get on client calls. And I go, I got you. I feel you. I get it. But it's how my brain goes. It's like I start helping her with something or start talking about something. And the next thing, and I do this with everybody. I go, whether it's Jamie at Fit Body Fusion or whether it's Paul with, Pro Physiques or whoever it may be, they always go, okay, you gave me more information than I needed. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I try to keep it short, but it never happens. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Well, I love it.
But anyway,
actually. Yeah. And I think you make some really good points too. Like a couple things that I had written down that I wanted to make sure got driven home, which is like, you're done when you're not happy. Your body's going to slow down. But if you have picked the sport that has no end, and you can enjoy that you're doing this for you and your health, which I believe sends the message that don't just do this for the stage, but have other reasons to do this, because these habits and these decisions and this lifestyle you're living now is going to affect you in every area moving forward. And you're very open, very personable person. So I'm just going to straight up ask you, but like, how has your history in bodybuilding impacted family and relationships? Like, how do you view it now that you're not necessarily competing, but you're so heavily invested in your work?
Well, so work is always something I think that when you become heavily invested in, it almost becomes like a relationship with it itself. Family life is never, like I said, no one has a perfect life. It's just not going to happen. We can all wish in one hand and crap in the other and see which gets filled first. But life is a series of curveballs that come at you. And what I've often found is that it doesn't matter what it is, you have to work at it. So sometimes, and without getting too outside the box here, I go, everybody has to work at their relationships. Everybody has to work at their jobs. Everybody has to work at it is a balance factor, and it's not always easy. And whether I was in, the construction industry, which is what I did outside of bodybuilding for years, or it's bodybuilding itself, it does take a large amount of concentration. So you have to learn to balance as best you can. And, parents, spouses, children, whatever you may have, you have to put the effort forth. You can't just stop and just concentrate on one factor. Because if you do, you're going to fail. And I hate to say that, but it's just, you have to put effort forth in everything you do. And it's not easy. People a lot of times want to make excuses. You know, they have a good boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, whatever, and things don't work out. Sometimes that's not the spouse's fault. That's everything to do with who you are and how you're trying to manage your relationships. A lot of times there's people I know that just push away from a significant other. They're not, and I go, that's okay too. I go, but you have to accept responsibility for yourself. At the end of the day, if you can't look in the mirror and realize that it's not other people, it's me, I have to be responsible for me. That's the number one thing that if you want to take away one thing that we might talk about today, this might be it. Because I go, always remember, you can point at the judges and go, oh, I didn't do well because the judges don't like me. Oh, I didn't do well because my coach didn't pay enough attention to me. Oh, my relationship fell apart because I was not, you know, I didn't give enough effort for it. Whatever it may be, it always relies upon the individual. So I think that you hit on a very interesting subject. Once again, this could be we could do a whole webcast, like episodes every day for a month.
We could, a whole series.
We could. And I think that, I think a lot of times we put so much effort into one thing that we lose others. And I know life is a big balancing. It always is. It's never going to change. It's whether it's, like I said, parents, siblings, you know, children, spouse, friends, job, hobbies, you know, whatever it may be. It's very difficult sometimes to remember that we have to take care of these things. It's not something we can blame other people for when relationships don't work out or jobs don't work out. It's not, we shouldn't point the finger at other people. What we should stop and do is go, how could I have made this situation better? What can I do to make my relationships better? You know, as a competitor, what can I do to be better? It shouldn't even be worried about, well, you know, this person on stage with me was this, or this person was this, or this person's friends with so-and-so, or this judge likes me or doesn't like me. I go, you know, to be honest, I go, as a judge, never once do I look up at the stage and go, oh, I don't like this person. I don't even know what that means. I just see a body and I go, okay, we have a split second to judge a body in front of us. And that's what we have. So it's interesting sometimes to think about life in general. I know we're kind of, once again, throwing off on that tangent, the spin, but I go, really take responsibility for your own actions and what you want to be. What do you want to be when you grow up is what I always say. What do you want to do? What, you know, where is your happiness? Where does it lie? Because your happiness is important. It's something that doesn't come from other people. It comes from within. So you have to really care about what you are doing. And that grows the leaves of the tree. I go, it grows and it blooms out. So those are the way that's how I look at things in my philosophy, because it's not always been easy. Nothing we do is easy. Relationships aren't easy. Sometimes we do get caught up in, you know, different things. And whether it's jobs, like I said, or hobbies or whatever, but we have to realize, okay, do we rein this in? Is this where we want to be? What is our happiness?
Yeah.
How are we happy? So once again, that's a great question. I hope I semi-answered it. It's not easy because every person's going to have a different answer for this.
That's right. And honestly, what I love is the main takeaway you shared, which is personal responsibility. I literally just had a conversation with my coach actually for a feature episode on the podcast. And we were talking about how I believe personal responsibility is what allows us to learn. And you see competitors blame the sport, blame the industry, blame their coach for problems that come when they decide to maybe step away. I was a jaded competitor at one point. I will admit it, 2015, after my first show, I had a lot of things I needed to work on internally. And I'm so glad I went through that, because I wanted to blame competing. I wanted to blame the sport. I wanted to blame the eating disorders. I wanted to blame the body, all of that. But when I took personal responsibility for myself, my actions, my beliefs, my choices, my goals, my life, everything opened up for me. Because when you recognize that it is within your hands, your life is within your hands, that's an intrinsic motivation. That's like, you feel that you can be more congruent in your life. And I think chasing balance is almost like chasing perfection. Because if you look up the definition of balance, it's very much like having things in perfect order, and there isn't perfection. So I like to pursue congruency and value satisfaction, which takes me to what you said, which is make sure that at the end of the day, you are happy. Like, how are you happy? What is your happiness? And I think something I noticed about you is you carry yourself with a lot of confidence and pride, and it's in a very palpable way. So I thought I'd ask, like, what you think sets you apart and your shows apart from maybe other shows or professionals in the industry. I know you never say that one's better than the other, and you respect them all and you love the industry. So I'm not going there, more so just like, how do your shows differ and your experience that you provide differ?
Okay, that's an easy answer for me, because I've had this conversation multiple times with multiple people. My goal as a promoter, when you come to one of my shows, it's the experience that you have. It's not a trophy. It's not anything anything material. I go, that intrinsic feeling, that inside feeling you get when you go, how did he make me feel? How did we feel when we had the show? Whether I placed first and I won and I'm going to the nationals and I become a pro 3 weeks. Let me sidebar here for a second.
Yeah.
Let's see here, it's 8 years. I've had over 320 athletes cross that Klash stage and then go to the national shows and get their pro cards. That's a high number of athletes. I go, the shows are known for intense competition. They're known for having some great athletes cross the stage that just blow your mind. Now, on the other side of that, I always go, didn't matter if you placed first or placed, dead last. How did you feel when you left that show? And my job is, from the moment you get to that show until the moment you leave, you felt welcomed, you felt happy, you felt like, this is my people, this is my group, this is where I want to be. And I've said this for years. I go, you can make years from now, 20 years from now, when you do a show, and let's say you won. I know so many people. My training partner, God rest his soul, he's no longer with us. I watched him go 20 years to get his pro card. He finally gets his pro card. We did the Masters, Olympia. We did the New York Pro. We did all these shows together where we trained together and everything. And I tell people all the time, he won 93 contests, 93. And guess what? The trophies didn't matter. He moved, things happened, they break, everything. That's all material stuff. But you never forget how you felt at a show. You don't go to a show and not remember how you felt. I go, when you leave that show, you should feel like, wow. So I always tell people, I go, my shows, I don't know what other people try to do with theirs, but what I try to do is create an experience. I want everybody to go, wow. So the best compliment I can ever get is, years after people do a show, still, they'll put things on social media, and maybe they're blowing sunshine up my skirt, I don't know, but I go, when someone tells me, your show was the best show I've ever done, and I'll ask them why. And they'll say, I still remember the atmosphere. And, we talk about this a lot with a lot of trainers and everything. We use the word the vibe. What was the vibe? And I always say that all the time. Janelle and Casey and, all a great group of people that I talk to on a regular basis will say, what's the vibe? How did someone make you feel? Did the show have a good attitude? Did it have a good air about it? Did everybody feel welcomed? I go, so that's the thing I try to do differently than others. And, not that I don't know what other people do. I try not to think about that. I try to only do better for myself. And I always go, that's one thing though that I will not, settle for, is the people, even down to the people that I put on my crews, I go, I expect a great, response from athletes. And when I do get a complaint, because we all get complaints, a lot of times it's not even what maybe one of my crew members did. It's just, we have to sometimes step back and go, people are stressed. How do you handle what's going on in their mind? But I go, still to this day, I go, at the end of the day, what I want is for you to walk out of a show and you go, damn, that was a lot of fun. I had a good time. We had a blast. I was with my friends. I was with people that are like-minded. That's what you're going to remember. I go, I used to always say back when I competed, I go, the contests were never, back then, they were really not fun. They were really, really hardcore. I mean, like, line up here, shut up, don't talk. I go, it was that way. But I go, what I remember the most was training with my training partners in the gym and the environment we had and the fun. So I go, I take that out of the gym and I want to put that feeling that I had into the shows. So that's why when I run these Klash Series shows, I go, I want it to be so memorable that people go, oh yeah, 20 years from now, 30 years, whatever it may be, I always tease athletes. I go, get as many pictures as you can, video, whatever you got. I said, because someday you're going to have a grandchild on your lap. You're going to be 80 years old and you're going to go, look how good grandma looked.
Yeah.
And I go, that's the part that we can't duplicate. It's not only the look, it's the feeling.
Yeah.
The feeling that you had at that show and how much excitement that you gather from it. I go, it's a high that when we're on stage and we come off and it still continues through the whole event. When we leave after the weekend, we almost feel a letdown. Like, ooh, the post-show blues. We've all heard it. I got the post-show blues. I don't have that up. Well, I want to put it so far up that, like I said, years down the road, you go, wow, that was fun. That was excitement, enjoyment. It was pure bliss. So that's kind of how I view it. So even if you notice when you come like in November to the next show for the Klash is November 5th, and all the things being, it's going to be big. I mean, right now we're doing very well on the entries and everything. And I go, it'll be very competitive. But what I want people to do is the minute they walk through that door at check-ins, which check-ins are always fun because I always watch what happens at check-ins. You watch a lot of shows and people look like they're going to the guillotine the way that they're walking into a check-in. I try to turn that into a positive moment where I'm like, your hard work's done. Why are you stressing? Let's have fun with it. Smile, laugh, enjoy the free gifts, enjoy all the things that are coming to you. You did the work. Let's enjoy the moment. And a lot of times, once again, not to get too philosophical, but I say things like this all the time. I go, we're so concerned about what happened yesterday or what's going to happen a week from now that we're not concentrating on the moment we're standing in. And that's so easy for us to do. I go, people do it all the time. I go, I've watched relationships fall apart because people are looking at the past and concentrating on one thing or looking in the future. I've seen careers fall apart doing the same thing. I've seen people that are good people not live in the moment. So, when I look at these things, I go, that's what separates, at least I like to think that's what separates the shows. I try to do so, materially, I try to do some fun things that I go, okay, let me give back a little bit, free photo package, free video at the show. I go, those are things that cost me, a lot of money, but it's okay. Those are the memories you're going to remember. Like I said, the trophy, the medals, the supplements, all those things you might not remember, but you're going to remember the way you looked. I go, and that's so important. And how you felt walking on that stage. When you walked on that stage, how did you feel? Did you have judges? I try to handpick my judges at my shows that are people, number one, that I'm very good friends with, that I also know will help, the athletes in their career. But I also try to make sure that they are attentive to the needs of the people on the stage. I don't want people who are going to come to a show and then just walk away at the end. I want people to pay attention to the athletes. And, unfortunately, we have all different kinds of personalities. So once again, I want people to be comfortable. So I feel that's the most important thing I can do at my shows. And I'm happy because, once again, I'll throw in my promo plugs. Next year, I'm expanding. I got 5 pro-ams next year. So I look at it and I go, starting in March, it's, every one of them's a pro-am. The first 4 right off the bat are pro bikini pro-ams. So it's a true series. And I'm coming up with different ways to make it fun for everyone, how it's going to be presented, where we're going to send people to pay for entries for pro qualifiers. And even with our pros, one of the things I'm very animate about, I am not charging our pro masters competitors entry fees, but they're still going to get prize money.
Ask about this. I love this.
Yes. Well, and once again, I'm just being me. It's how I'm going to do business and what I want to do. And I just feel that, you're a pro. You've earned a certain respect from me. You have. And I'm going to do my best to make sure that I do my job, which is raise sponsor money, try and do the things I'm supposed to do to support, the shows and the business, and then make sure there is some prize money. And also then I was like, all right, how do I take a step further? All right, why don't we take our pro masters winners, give them some prize money? It's not that it's going to set the world on fire with the prize money, but I go, let's pay for their entry to go to the pro world. Let's do something extra. Let's take it one step above and beyond. But also for the rest of the competitors, because once again, there's only one winner. I go, okay, let's make it that it's still going to be a blast for you. The photo packages, the fun things, the tiaras, the medals, the gift bags, whatever we could do. But I don't want to charge people. So I might be a last of a dying breed, because I know most of the other promoters, have gone the other way, and I'm not downgrading anybody for their choices. Everybody runs their shows the way they want. We are all independent. There is no, in our organization, there is no one that says you have to do as a promoter. We have our rules that we have to follow, but as for, can you charge a master's? Of course you can. I just don't want to. That's just me. So I might be a lone wolf on an island all by myself, but this is how I'm going to run it until I can't do it anymore. And I just feel it's the right thing to do. Once again, just me. It has no reflection on anyone else. I'm not downgrading anyone. This is my thoughts and my humble ramblings. So, there's other things. Like I said, that we're starting in March next year, and we go March, April, May, and then we conclude the bikini portion in August. And then our last show in the series, which is our pro wellness show, and our, all of them have national qualifiers, which will send our winners to national shows. We have them all mapped out throughout the course of the year. But I always want to try and do a little something extra. So even in our NPC portion, one of the largest numbers I get is our bikini 35 plus masters in the NPC, in our amateurs. So I said, why don't we do something for them too? Let's pay to send them to the Masters Nationals. Yeah. Pay their entry, give them something a little extra. So as I'm updating my website and getting everything ready for 2023, I always have to keep in mind that I'm not done with 2022 yet. So I'm still focusing on, we're 4.5 weeks out from the November 5th show at the Grand Cypress in Orlando. And I hope everybody out there listening, even if they're not competing, will come and support and cheer everybody on. And I think we're going to have a really big wellness show this year. So I think it's going to be interesting to watch who shows up, because I know a few names, but I'm not going to say them. But you got some good people coming. And not only that, but I know that it's a team show for a lot of our big training teams across the country. So I'm excited. I'm really excited to see so many faces. And, that for me, we talk about the post-show blues. I go, I'm the same way. I get done judging a show, and maybe I don't see, the trainers that I adore, the people that I love spending time with. I don't get to see them for weeks, months. So that sometimes is tough too, because I go, you form so many relationships in this business, and I go, that's the only way that we really continue to make things better for our sport is to be, you know, tied to people. Relationships are everything. So for me, I go, okay, how do we move forward? How do we make the shows better? And I'm always trying to think through it. And it's something that I don't take lightly. I take a deep responsibility in it. And I'm glad that I'm able to do what I'm doing, which, like I said, success in other parts of life has allowed me to come back and be a teenager again. So that's kind of a wonderful feeling. And like I said, at 50 years old, I feel like I'm just starting. And you know, it's fun to watch people go, "You're 50," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about me. I'm fine." You know, but you know, that's where I feel that life is so important. I go, there's a phrase out there, and I'm sure you've heard it. It's a French phrase. How do you live your life? You're a bon vivant. You're a lover of life. You love everything. You love all things good. And that's how I feel a lot of times. I go, I love to live through other people and see success, because that shows me that I'm leaving something behind, some impression. I don't have any kids. So it's like, okay, you don't have any kids, so you can't leave any impression behind with the children you have. So you go, what about how you interact with other people? And I think that's the legacy that we all want to leave something behind. So I hope that wasn't too long-winded either. Everybody out there listening right now is like, I wish you'd shut the hell up and just answer the questions. But
no, there's so much more value in hearing someone just speak from the heart. So I'm grateful that you are speaking from the heart and sharing all this from what you intend to provide for the athletes, the experience, the reasoning you provide that, the way that you perceive the experience and want other people to remember it as well. And then that goes into you having your legacy. And when I had heard you say, you know, you want to be able to show your grandkids one day, maybe like this was me on a bodybuilding stage, I always think like how we talk about the sport, the way we engage in the sport, the relationships, like you said, that we build in the sport, the process, those are the things that we will remember more than anything. And so we need to prioritize those things. And you've been able to do that.
And you know, yes, you know what's so funny? I say this all the time. I go, if you really think about what we do, who are your best friends? They're people you train with. They're your training partners. They're your, you know, co-competitors. They're people that are involved in the sport. I tell people all the time, I go, how do I say this? The godparents of your children, your wedding party, all your friends, the ones that stay in your life are ones you were in the gym with. I will put that statement on the line a million times over, because I go, they're people that have like qualities and like mindsets. And once you have friends that you've trained with, they're friends for life. All the people in the world I've trained with over and over and over again, I go, what's funny is no matter where we go, we still remember where we trained together, who trained with what, what body part we trained. It's just, those are the things that we get in the gym, and it becomes our sanctuary, our zen, our easy place. And when I say easy, I go, that's where the one spot where you can leave your problems at work, family, whatever, you know, that you might be having, the normal life woes. And that's the one spot where your brain goes clear. So I think that's why we always gravitate to that group of people as our closest core. So once again, I go, it's funny to like watch what happened in my journey in my life and watch people now, because it doesn't matter how a lot of things change, they stay the same. And that's a good thing. I go, because like I said, those people mean a lot to me over the last 30, 35 years. And it's not going to change. And like I said, I've lost a lot of them. You know, they were older than me. They were my mentors that took care of me as a teenager, wouldn't let me do stupid stuff when I was young. And I will never forget this group of people, no matter where I go, because they help put that ethic into your brain, the mentality of how you want to live your life. How do you want to be positive? You have two choices every day when you wake up. You can be miserable or you can be happy. I look at it all the time and I go, I would rather be happy. It's a lot better feeling than being angry. So, I've been very blessed. I came back to this sport and got, I had judged her a long, long time ago. And like I talked about during the retreat, I came back and, now we're on year number 5, I think it is, of judging the Olympia. So I go, if you would have asked me when I was a 16-year-old kid reading Muscle and Fitness or Flex Magazine or Muscular Development or any of the other magazines back then, and the Iron Man, I would have said, there's never any way I'm going to be one of the judges, one of the top 11 judges in the world who's judging a freaking bodybuilding contest. It's just, there's only so many that are chosen every year, and it's not a given. You don't always get that honor. So for me, it is a big honor, and I always go, I don't take that lightly either. I don't take it lightly when I judge any contest. And back to where we started earlier when you said you have rituals. Of course I have rituals, but I also always have nerves, and it never goes away. It never stops. I go, and if it does stop, then it's probably time for me to go, because I feel that strongly about, okay, I'm trying to be the best I can be as a judge to help these athletes. And I don't want someone to get hurt where I just think, oh, I overlooked somebody. Yeah, I don't ever want that feeling. So that's, once again, things that kind of rattle around in my brain while I'm sitting at that table. You think about, what are the judges thinking? I'm sure that athletes think that all the time. What's he thinking?
Yeah.
I'm really thinking about, where am I placing you based upon what I'm seeing? And I don't want you to think, oh, he missed me or he didn't pay attention. You work too damn hard for that. I don't want that. So that's me in a nutshell. I go, and I'm sure you got more questions on your list. I should probably be a little more succinct in my answers, but I'm usually pretty long-winded, so whatever.
Well, as you express yourself, I'm crossing things off my list because you're answering questions I had. So it actually segues really nicely into something I had written down, which was, if you ever felt like you were not in the right place mentally to do the best job you could do as a judge, whether it was in the judging or in providing of feedback.
And that's an interesting question, because I don't know if I've necessarily ever felt that way, but I will say this: there was a show, goodness, this was the North Americans, I think it was the North Americans, maybe about 5 years ago. I was really sick at the night show, and I just was not doing well. And I looked over at Sandy and I go, Sandy, I'm just not feeling good. I would never walk away from a table, but I go, I feel like I'm sitting here not doing my job. And she's like, get out of here. And it's so funny, because I tell people all the time, she's like, go back to your room. And I was like, I did. I went back to my room and I slept until the next morning, came back and then judged. I felt much better, judged the next day. But I go, I never sit down at the table and think I'm not going to do my best. And unless it was physically sick, like that instance where it was like, okay, I had a touch of something. I just was, but I recused myself from the panel. I just got up and left. And there was another judge that sat in for me, because I don't want to be at a point where I can't concentrate on what's going on ahead of me. And here's another example. North Americans, even this year, it was a long show on Saturday. Our wellness bikini day was exceptionally long. I want to say it was brutal. Toward the end of the day, it was brutal. And toward the end of the day, I had such a headache. And we were almost done with prejudging. It was about 4 or 5 o'clock. And I looked backwards, and it was funny because obviously, Casey's one of my closest friends. And I looked at her and I go, aspirin. And she looked at me and she goes, next thing I know, she's at the little apothecary. She comes back, and I looked at the bottle, and it was like a bottle of like 10 aspirin, and it was like $25. But I was like, I need these so bad.
Yeah.
I was just like, I need these. But I sit there and I go, it's amazing how, really when I watch other judges, I go, when you watch a Sandy or a Steve Weinberger or, Tyler, I go, they work so hard. And I go, a lot of times they just are grinding. And I go, but Sandy is the best at what she does. And I don't mean to, once again, I'm not putting anybody else down. This is just my humble opinion. I go, Sandy is just, she does it because of pure passion. And when, Sandy's 70 years old.
What?
Sandy's
I
70.
had no idea.
Yes. So
Wow.
when she decides to walk away and retire, this sport will lose one of its biggest pieces of heart that it's ever had.
Yes.
And, I always say to her, I go, they will never, ever find a one person replacement. You're going to need 4 people to replace Sandy, at least. I go, she is just, her acuity and how she looks at things, and also her attention to detail, but also her feedback is just impeccable. I go, because she tries. I go, and she tries harder than anyone I know. So I always say that. I go, listen, that's my role model. That's the person who basically has trained me. So whenever something happens at a table and we start, this is a little insight that I hope everyone finds funny. Like something will happen and she'll go to me, is that who you're going with? And I'll go, yeah. And she goes, me too. And I'll go, well, you trained me. That's what I always say to her. Well, you trained me.
That's so cute.
I go, so good or bad, you did this to me. That's what I always tell her. You did this to me. So like I said, I go, that's my shout out to Sandy. And I think everyone listening to this podcast will see the same thing and say the same thing. They'll go, never have you gone to her and not gotten a good opinion of what she thinks you need to do.
100%.
And that's, and I think that's so important. That feedback is so valuable to an athlete. And once again, we didn't have feedback when there was no such thing when I was, competing back in the late 80s, early 90s. It just wasn't there. You didn't go to a judge and say, or if you did happen to catch one and say, what can I do better? It was always the same, they wouldn't even remember you or write notes. We write notes at the table through a whole show. Whether it's Sandy or myself or Edela or whoever it may be, we're writing notes the whole time and grading how we see, someone asked me, I think you guys asked that during the seminar, how do you guys, and I go, literally, we grade it like a report card, and that's how we group athletes and how we make call outs and everything else. I go, once again, it's just how your brain interprets, separating the athletes that are on stage. So it's always fun to look at this stuff and go, all right. Yeah. So here's a great example. My next trip, I'm going to Warsaw, Poland, in a couple weeks. And it's a show that is a regional qualifier, a pro qualifier, and also an Olympia qualifier. So they have 3 different shows going on that weekend. And I know when I get there, I'm going to have to go through 500, 600 athletes. It's going to be a big show. At least normally they are. So one of this magnitude where you have all these different levels, they're usually very big and they're, grinds. It's a 2-day show with, 500 athletes or whatever it may be. That's okay. That's why I'm here. I'm looking forward to it. Actually, I'm really excited to go. Sans the 15 hours of flight time, I'm excited to go. But, once again, I go, we do this because we love what we do. And I hope that leaves a little bit of an impression on everybody out there that, people often say, what do you get paid as a judge? And I go, do you really want to know? And they go, yeah. And I go, absolutely nothing. You get a stipend for your expenses, basically, and for your food, and that's your payment. No judge is there because you're going to get rich. That's not what we do. We're there because we all have a passion. Every one of us does. And, most of us are former competitors. I think 99% of us are. There's a few, I can't think of any judges that are currently judging that are not. There's a few in the past that are no longer with us that were non-competitors, but I would have to say everybody I judge with right now has been a competitor. So they have that passion. They have that thought in their minds of, now, once again, I hope that I can help people along the way. And all I could ever, once again, going back to what we talked about, I can only do what I can do. And I try to make sure that I help people. I try to answer every email that comes in. And that's not always easy, because sometimes you're traveling and you have 75 emails sitting in your inbox, and you answer those 75 and 75 more come in.
Yeah.
And, you know, one thing that made me laugh, the one day I said, the past 4 years, on the average, 52 weekends out of the year, I've judged 40 shows a year. So if you can imagine the number of feedback that comes along with judging that number of shows and being on the road, and, you know, even when they're local and you get home, and on top of that, you're still promoting your own shows, and your life is constantly revolving around the organization and the sport. And that's why I always tell people, if you don't really love what you're doing, you wouldn't do this.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot. It's a lot. And I'm not going to lie. I go, it's a lot of work. And I love every minute of it. What else you got? Come on, knock them down. We got to make sure we get all your questions answered, because otherwise people are going to go, he just kept rambling and rambling. He's a pain in the ass. I hear that.
Well, you know
what else you got?
That's like part of why I wanted to bring you on, is because you have that heart. Like I said in the intro, is like, that's what was just like magnetic. And I want people to see that you're more than a judge, more than a promoter. There's like a heart and a soul inside of you. So I also want to acknowledge what you said about smiling when athletes step on stage. I had some people message me and say, please tell him that means so much to see him smiling. And they also reference that Sandy does that too, and they always appreciate it. I can speak from experience with Sandy that does mean a lot. It is really special, and it goes a long way. But I wanted to go back to something you said. You had left the judging, you excused yourself from the judging table. You recognize judging can be extremely taxing and exhausting. There's a lot that goes into it that maybe athletes don't consider or think about, but are there instances where a judge could actually be like suspended or removed from the position?
Yes, but it's always a case by case basis, I guess you would say. So misconduct, of course, can always remove somebody, you know, and everything we do is, I always go, you're put, especially in today's day and age, you are put under a microscope. Mm-hmm. Okay, so social media, all these different things. I go, everybody, if you don't make the best call, let's just use this one, because this is an easy one. Someone goes, well, wait a minute, this judge he judged his nephew in a contest and his nephew won and he shouldn't have. I go, first off, he should have never been judging it. His family member or someone he's related to was on stage. You know, there are times where, you know, I've always said this, you know, we used to have judges who were trainers. We've tried to get away from that. Now, you don't want to impede people from making a living ever, because I go, that's, people make money training people. So one of the questions I always ask when I sit down with the judging panel, do you have anybody in the show that you have a relationship with? And when I say that, I go, have you made money from somebody? Are you a coach for them? If you are, just when that person is on stage, you get up and remove yourself from the panel. It's not, you know, then there's no conflict of interest. I go, but yes, if someone lies about that, they can be removed. There are instances all the time behind the scenes where, you know, someone gets accused of something like that, and you go, okay, it gets sent to the office looks at it, they investigate what they have to do, and if a person is not forthright, yes, they can be suspended from judging or removed entirely and not used again in the future. So it's a very interesting slippery slope where you go, okay, how honest are people? You know, do we know that so-and-so's, you know, cousin is on stage? Not unless someone tells us, you know, I wouldn't know.
Right.
As a head judge, I mean, I try to manage that in the Florida, you know, I always tell people, I go, always try to think of this we have so much going on in just one little microcosm. Whether it's, for me, it's Central Florida. I mean, this is my area where I'm trying to manage judges and shows and everything else that's going on. So it's not, now imagine that blown up around the world. So yes, there are times where judges do get relieved of their duties. And I hate to say it, but that's above my pay grade. I don't, like I said, unless it's someone in my direct report that I have to deal with, which I, have not had this, because as I've taken over, I've made it very animate about these are the rules. And guys, I would rather you just step away from the panel, or just say, hey, I can't judge that show because I have a client that's going to be in it. That's even easier. Then I'll go get another judge. I have trained judges. I would rather you didn't put yourself in harm's way, because if something like that happens, then I can't use you again, or at least for a long, long time. So it's a very interesting world we live in, because I go, I look at every athlete that I get on stage, I go, I actually become friends with almost, this is a sad part, but I go, there's probably 50-60% of the athletes that get on stage that I become friends with, that I talk to on a regular basis. But I also go, we're also social people. So once again, I always go, if you don't deserve to play somewhere, I'm not placing you there. But a lot of people don't see it that way. They go, oh, well, Joe was friends with, and I go, yeah, that doesn't work that way. Sandy's friends with a ton of people. Tyler's friends with a ton of, I go, at the end of the day, where did you place? And once again, the relationship thing, that one's always an easy one, because if you're judging your spouse who's on stage, or your cousin, you're probably going to push for them to be in a better spot, even though they might not deserve it. And that judge needs to be removed. So it can happen, and it does happen. We try to be as ethical as possible. And once again, I can't control what other people do. I try to monitor it and make sure they do their best, just as I would. So I know that might not be the answer. Hopefully that was the answer you wanted, or
no, that was fantastic.
To be truthful, to be as truthful as possible. I go, yes, it does happen. It happens.
Yeah.
But that's part of, running the organization, and also part of trying to stay consistent with what we do. And that's not always easy. Like I said, I go, there's a lot of times people say, I want to be a judge. And you go, well, I have a training team. And I go, I can't use you. I've had plenty of people who want to test judge, and they say, I want to be a judge. And I'll say, wait, don't you have a big training team? Well, yeah. Well, you can't do both. You just can't. You really have to realize, okay, you know what? You're in a position where you can't be responsible, because you're going to push for your own athletes. That can't happen.
Right. Like, judges are,
at least if we want to, yes, at least if you want to keep some form of integrity in the group. So once again, that's just the way it goes. So yes, there are people who have been removed. And you have to make a choice. And once again, choices in life can lead up to a lot of things. What do you want to do? Do you want to be a judge? Do you want to be a trainer? I ask that question a lot. And I've told really good judges, I said, you do realize you make a living training people, or you can make a living training people. Judging is not where you're going to make a living. This is something that's almost like a give back in what you're doing. And that's why also too, as you get to certain levels of judging, you realize that, okay, only so many people can do what you do. And it's because it's not a paid position. It's not. It's a stipend to just cover your travel expenses and your food. But you have to be willing to give that time up on the weekends, which a lot of people don't want to.
Yeah.
What else you got?
That's so interesting. I love this behind the scenes look. And actually, it also makes me wonder how someone progresses from judge to head judge.
Well, that one, okay. So every judge starts out from a test judging spot. And depending on how you do, the normal is 3 test judging opportunities. You have to hit a certain percentage, which has always been a minimum of 85%. And you have to be able to make your call outs correctly. Now, that gets you involved in the state regional judging process. Now, as a state regional judge, you have so many years of experience that have to take place as a judge, or a combination of judging and competing. And then your chairperson would put you, or how do I say this? Because a lot of our places anymore are now run by the national office. Someone, whether it's the national office or the state chairperson, will put that candidate up for a national test judging experience. So now they have to go to one of the national shows and test judge there, where it gets a lot more difficult. Because as we know, you go to the nationals, you have 800 competitors. You go to the North Americans, it's 1,200 competitors. Now you have to be able to do your call outs and your progressions, because where that becomes is, can this person handle the job of being a head judge? Now, once you pass that exam, then you have the opportunity back in your state district or your local district to head judge, which, once again, I've always been of the, okay, I'm going to give you small opportunities, a little at a time, get you comfortable on the microphone, because it's not always easy to talk into a microphone. People think it is until you have to actually run a show from the table. And then once once again, that's a comfort factor. Once people start getting better and better at it, then you kind of have that ability to be a head judge, which is not, once again, you have a lot of training that goes behind that to be able to identify what the organization wants. It's not what Joe wants. It's not what, this judge likes, that judge likes. It's what fits the criteria of our organization. And that's how we're supposed to judge. And once again, now you become a head judge, you'll get opportunities along the way. And then the pro league is a whole separate issue, because now you have to have more years of experience, along with the national judging, along with all these other factors, to even get on a panel in the pro league, let alone to become a pro league head judge, which is a whole nother step, and et cetera, et cetera. So, once again, there are a lot of steps, and without getting into too many details, everything is deep. Like, how do we say this? It's leveled out. Like, you have to hit a certain level, and then another level, and then another level. And then finally, you get to the pro league and you judge there. Now, to become a head judge in the pro league, once again, that's a whole nother level of capabilities and expectations and responsibilities. And then, of course, that leads to, eventually, can you judge at the Olympia level, or the Arnold Classic, or a lot of our larger, the New York Pro, the Tampa. I've been fortunate that I've judged each one of them. The Olympia obviously is the aspiration of every judge that judges. But once again, it's a matter of knowing the criteria of the organization and being able to explain that and translate it to what the organization is looking for, not necessarily what an individual likes. And I think that's part of I think a lot of times, that if I can make one thing very clear to athletes that are listening to this, it's not what Joe likes, it's what the NPC likes. That's an important factor to remember, because a lot of times people will go, well, you like, and I'll go, no, it's not what I like. I'm trying to fit what I'm seeing in front of me into the criteria that's given to me and what the organization wants. That's the key. It's not really anything to do with my personal preference. So to put that out there, I go, it's no judge has really, any good judge out there is not looking at personal preference. They're looking at what are the criteria and how they interpret them, which when you get to the pro level, once again, I had this conversation during the retreat, was there's a fine line between first and 15th place. Little details make a huge difference at that level. And I'm not going to name one of the athletes that I talked to at the retreat, but I took her aside and I said, you're one of the best athletes in the world. And you're not realizing is that it doesn't, it does matter. I get it. You want to be first call out. You want to be first place. You want to go to the Olympia. I get all that. but you do realize you're doing what other people would kill to do. This is not easy. It's not something that everybody's going to be able to do. And you've busted your ass to get there, is what I told her. I go, so keep doing what you're doing, and guess what? Good things. And like I said, they keep coming to her. She's getting better and better, but you gotta keep your nose down, and you realize that there is a hair between 1st and 15th in the pro league. It is that tight when you judge, because you're putting it into the, like I said, the criteria of the organization. So once again, now I've given all these judging insights. What else you got?
I wanted it all. I'm like absorbing everything. It's so freaking cool. I love this because it shows there's a high level of commitment and respect. And as athletes, you know, we're putting in a lot of work, which you've recognized and you respect, but also like judges have to go through a process as well. And it's very parallel to the process of becoming a pro. But I did want to ask you personally, if you've ever found that your personal preference of a physique or a look clashes with the criteria of the division.
No, and here's why. We do have a lot of meetings throughout the year where we sit down and we go over things that, you know, like I think I might even mention this at the Boss Bodies retreat. I'm very vocal. If I see something that I go, okay, this doesn't make sense to me, how do we put this into the criteria? For instance, I go, I don't think a bikini girl should ever be striated in the delts, have real deep teardrops in her glute tie-in, hamstring tie-in. I don't find, you know, hamstrings that are popping. I go, to be that over conditioned to me is not necessarily a bikini trait. Mm-hmm. It's not in our criteria. It's not written.
Right.
So when I start to see these things pop up, I'll say, is this the look you want us to go for? Because I might not agree with that, but that's what's great. I go, we sit down at the Olympia and all of us judges, the 11 plus, you know, Tyler, or Jim and everybody else, the boss, everything, we sit down and we go, what are we looking for? And you get to the point where you go, are we too hard? Are we too this? Are we too that? And once again, it is subjective, but also too, if I can look at you as an athlete when you come off the stage and I go, the reason I placed you in 4th is you were too hard and, you know, you were too striated. As a bikini athlete, you shouldn't be striated. It's not in our criteria. You know, I go, once again, I can go back and tell an athlete that and tell them why I placed them where I placed them. And we have these conversations all the time between Sandy, myself, Tyler, Bill Sibilia. I go, they're all wonderful judges. Every one of them really puts a lot of thought into this. But there becomes a point where you go, I can't let my personal like come into how I decide this. Now, if I see something that I go, ooh, I think that's too much, or I think it's too little, or I will say something, and we have a meeting amongst people where we sit down and talk about it. So I go, once again, we try not to make decisions on our own where we think we know better than another group or another group of people. It's always a committee basis. And sometimes, you know, if I think it's going one way too far, I'll say it. I'm not afraid. I think you've gotten that out of me by now. I'm not afraid to say anything to anyone. I try to be very forthright to what I see as the interpretation of our criteria. And when I think as a group we might be moving in a direction that I go, ooh, might be too much, we sit down and we talk about it. And once again, that's something that goes all the way to the top. And how do we deal with these things? How do we handle them? How do we interpret it? A great example is, okay, I love muscle. Okay, I'm an old bodybuilder. So when I see a lot of muscle on stage, I go, wow, that's fantastic. But it might not be good for the criteria of that group that's up on stage in front of me. So I've had girls at the nationals and at certain levels where I go, you're kind of out muscling bikini and you're moving into figure. they go, well, I don't want to be figure. I go, well, I can't change the criteria to fit your body. Now, do I love the look? Absolutely. Of course. Muscle is beautiful. I go, it's a beautiful trait. We all want to build muscle. That's what we do. But you also get to a point where you go, okay, now you're pushing the envelope. And that goes for bikini to figure, figure to women's physique to bodybuilding, throw wellness in the mix. You have a set of criteria. And when you push that envelope, you have also changed the criteria that you're supposed to be abiding by. So I go, it's not my personal preference that I would love to go. Like I said, I love muscle. Everybody knows that. It's just that, we all do. But there comes a certain point where you go, that is too much for bikini based upon the criteria we are given. So we have to judge it that way. And that's, if you look at a local level show and then you look at a pro level show, you can see the difference in muscle between an amateur and a pro in bikini. Now you get to the pro level where it starts to top out and you go, okay, can she be too big? I mean, we had some amazing athletes come over from Europe many a times at the, Orlando Europa and all these other different shows. And they got on stage and I go, that is a killer body. She's way too big for bikini. I mean, her arms are jacked, her back is, she's, it's amazing, but it doesn't fit the criteria. So we always have that. And it is subjective. Don't get me wrong. We have to try to interpret it to the standards that we are given. And once again, not always easy, but at least one thing I've always said is when an athlete gets off stage, if I can explain to them what I see and how they can get better based upon what I see to the next show or the next level, whether it's the national level, then I'm doing my job. And that's all I ever really want to do is make sure that I give people good advice, or at least the advice I think is good based upon what I see. And that's all I can do. I can't change anything other than that. Once again, personal responsibility. You have to be able to give your reasoning for what you did. Doesn't matter if you're an athlete or you're a judge or you're, working in a business somewhere totally not related to this sport. You have to take responsibility for your actions. So I hope if I leave you with one thing today, that's the one thing I leave you with. Take responsibility for yourself and life gets a lot easier. So absolutely. What else we got? Come on. I know you got at least 10 more questions.
I do. So we should do like
a rapid fire round because people are not going to want to listen to this long. They're going to be like, this has been an hour and 30 minutes and he doesn't shut up. So we should do like a rapid fire round where you're, yeah, I know, but we should do like one where you're like, I'm going to give you 10 questions. You have like less than a minute to 30 seconds to answer each one. Let's roll that way.
All right.
Like I said, or we just have to do this again and people will be like, oh my God, he's going to be on again. He won't shut up. So,
oh my gosh, you're going to be highly requested. I guarantee it. This is going to
open up more questions. I don't know about that. I think a lot of people will be like, I did cardio listening to him and I did cardio for an hour and he still wouldn't shut up. So
that's why they love it though. Okay. Well, you were just talking about giving feedback and how you want to make sure you're able to do that for an athlete. How does it feel for you, or maybe what goes through your head when you've given an athlete feedback and then they come back for feedback again and they've not made those changes or improvements?
Once again, I can only say what I see. I don't train people. I did years ago. I don't do that anymore, but I can tell you how to build muscle. But I always say people, I don't know your body. I don't know your trainer. I don't know what you're doing. I can tell you what you need. You need more glute round out. You need more this. You need, your upper body's too small for your lower body. You need to balance it out. I can give you all these different pieces of advice and tell you what I saw. It's your job to do it. And unfortunately, we do have athletes that come back and they don't change. Once again, they come to me and they say, what did I do? And I'll say, you still need more this, and this. I always try to be very constructive because I go, there's no point in, it's not always easy too. Sometimes people don't give themselves enough time. And listen, I want athletes to be on stage. Don't get me wrong. But I also will be the first person and they say, if I have 3 months and I can do, and I'll look at them and go, you're not going to make the gains you need in 3 months. It's just not going to happen. You need some time to build that roundness to the middle glute. You need that time to build your shoulders. You need that time to bring your whole upper body in general up to the level of your legs. And I know we all love to be on stage. We live for it. But sometimes you have to go, I need the time to rebuild and do the right things. And then, once again, if they show back up on stage, you can't, what's the old definition where you go, if you do the same thing over and over, but you're not changing anything, it's almost like insanity. It's like, okay, be realistic. Muscle is not something that is built overnight. And I think I've had this conversation a million times where I go, if you built a pound or two, just say 2 pounds of muscle on your frame over a year in the right places, you're going to look totally different than you did a year before. But sometimes it takes a year to put, it does take a year to put a couple pounds if you're lucky. So I go, once again, it's not something that, the key word in this is, do you have some patience? Because it's going to take a little patience to get what you want. And once again, there's another great, life lesson that we all talk about. Things happen to people who work hard and are patient in what they do. And, some people get faster gains than others. Sometimes people put 6 months in and they walk on stage and I go, okay, today's their day. I can't answer that, but I will say this. I go, when they show back up and they look the same, it's an easy conversation. Okay, I know your body. I've seen you before. You still need more this, and this. Keep pounding, keep doing your thing. And that's the nicest thing about getting to know people and forming relationships with the athletes, because I can look at it and go, I remember when I judged you at show A, show B, show C, show D, and you've made these improvements, but you still need these. And I think sometimes that's a comfort for an athlete where they feel like they do pay attention, the judges are paying attention to what I'm doing. And what I always tell them is, go back to your coach and figure out what you need to do and plan it out accordingly. Sandy and I have this statement that we always say: you can leave the sport for a long time. Go, we'll be here. We'll wait for you. We'll be here when you come back, or we'll be here, when you compete 5 times in a year. We're going to be there no matter what. And I don't, once again, I want people to compete. Don't get me wrong. But I go, sometimes you need time to get improvements. I go, if you notice, most really good bodybuilders, they might do 1 show a year, maybe 2, but usually 1, because it takes that time to put that quality muscle on, to build that kind of mass. I go, it's no different for bikini. If your glutes are flat, you got to, no pun intended, work your ass off to make them round. So it's not something that's going to happen in 3 minutes or, 3 weeks. You need a little bit of time to really work and eat and rest. Everything we do in the sport is so funny, because people will go, what's the key to success? And I'll go, train really hard, feed the muscle, and rest it. There's really only 3 things you need to do. And that's time immemorial. There's nothing else you can tell me than stress it, feed it, rest it. That's it. That is it. There is nothing else. There's no smoking gun magic formula that comes to being better, to creating anything you want on your body. That's it. So all those things being said, I go, it's not hard to be honest with an athlete. And as a matter of fact, if they get upset, I would rather they got upset because I was honest with them and they just didn't want to hear it. But normally they'll come back and go, you were right. And I've had that happen a lot. And if I just would have listened to you, I go, you know what my favorite words in life are? I told you so. I do that to people all the time. I tease Casey about that all the time. I go, I'm not going to say it, but I told you so. And I say that to everybody. I go, I told you so. I get, I'll say something like, you're like, Sandy, I know you're going to get busy later today and you're not going to be able to call me back. Oh, no, I'll call you back. Day goes by. She calls me the next day. She goes, "You were right." I go, "Told you so." I go, it's what we do. It's how we treat things and how we put it in perspective. Our perspective is everything in life. If you don't have a good vision and a good, clear mind, I don't care what you, like I said, you can go in the gym, and if you're not training hard, it'll get found out. If you're not eating good, it will be found out. If you're not resting and getting your sleep, it will be found out. I go, because the body is what it is. Some of us are a little luckier. We have better, turnout than, things respond quicker. But I go, all of us have potentials that we're not really getting to because, we find excuses. Everybody does. No matter, we go in the gym, "Oh, I don't feel that great today." You know what? Those are some of the best workouts you'll have in your life. When you go to the gym and you push through and you realize, "Oh my gosh, I'm clicking." It starts to click. Everything feels better. It's perspective. It's sometimes just even that on the other side of that, you go in the gym, you're not feeling great. You have maybe a mediocre workout with what you normally would do, but you still did it instead of just flagging it in and saying, "I'm not going to go today." So where do you want to be? How do you, will you accept criticism? That's one of the hardest things for anyone to do as a athlete or as even a person. Can you take criticism? Will you accept responsibility? You have to. It's you. Ultimately, bodybuilding is the most, as much as we surround ourselves with like-minded, great people, it's an individual thing. We're only as good as we push ourselves to be. So we have a choice. What do we want to be? Where do we want to go? What do we want to do? And like I said, I tell people all the time, I didn't become a pro athlete in pro bodybuilding. I pushed myself harder than most pros I trained with. And I trained with some of the best in the world. But it doesn't matter. I was still happy. At the end, I had to realize, okay, as a 15, 16, 17-year-old, 18-year-old, I was like, "I'm going to be Mr. Olympia someday." It never happened. But that's okay. I go, the enjoyment, the satisfaction, the strength, the mental acuity that I gained from this is played into everything else in my life. And I'm still very happy with, like I said, I look in the mirror and I go, I look all right. I am doing good. I am healthy. I am, and I still feel like I'm strong, which is important because I don't want to ever grow up to be that. I say grow up. Here I am, 50 years old. I don't want to get old and be like, I can't get out of a chair or I'm immobile. So for me, I go, this has given me so much enjoyment in life that, there's other bigger goals out there. There's so many things that we just don't see. Because like I said, normally we're focusing on past or future and not thinking about that exact moment right in front of us. But anyways, what else you got? Because I like I said, I have to shorten myself up. Otherwise, I'll just keep on going and going. So.
Well, me and you really resonated with the idea of something I had shared in my speech, which was the Jordan Peterson quote that if you execute today, you don't have to worry about the future. And I think that's just a really good point that you're making too, about being present in the moment and focusing on what needs to be done now and being willing to take criticism so you can improve. And I love the questions that you encourage people to ask themselves. I think, guys, if you're listening to this thinking like, "Oh my gosh, I want to remember all this," go back and write down the questions, because I'm writing them down. Like, these are great journal prompts. These are great things to be asking yourself every day when you wake up. Like, where do you want to be? Where do you want to go? How do you want to feel at the end of all this and during it too? Now, this question, maybe we don't have an exact answer. It can vary, but I would regret not asking. Is there anything that makes an athlete especially memorable?
Yes. And sometimes that has nothing to do with anything other than just the way they showed up on stage that day. There's certain times where you look at shows over the course of, like I said, 35 years, and you go, okay, a great example. I was at the 97 Olympia. Ronnie Coleman was 8th place that year. I stood outside at an after party outside the Queen Mary in Long Beach, California. I have it on video, home video. I had a big giant VHS video recorder. I stood there with Ronnie talking to him, and he said, I just think I'm going to quit. I don't know what the judges want. I'm never going to be good enough. These are his exact words. The next year, I'm at the Night of the Champions, which eventually became the New York Pro, the show we know now. He walked out on stage, and it was a moment where I looked up at the stage and I went, my training partner was in that show, and I looked up at the stage and I went, what the hell did he do between then and there? You know, between that 8-month period, whatever it was, it wasn't even, well, yeah, it was about 8 months. It was September to May the following year. And I look at that and I go, yes, there are times where athletes walk out on stage and you just go, wow. There's some where you just go, that's not going to be touched today. I've seen it in every division we have, where I go, and actually as a judge, sometimes that makes my life a lot easier, because I go, okay, I got my winner. Now the rest is going to fall into place real easy because I know who my winner is. It's a slam dunk. So yes, there are times where athletes walk on stage and you just go, wow. And it might just be that day, or it might be some that are starting, you know, a stretch of time where they just become, you know, a champion that just runs for years. You know, Jay Cutler, the Night of the Champions, that particular one I'm talking about, that was his first pro show. I stood in the hallway at the athlete meeting talking to him, and I think he placed 12th at that show. But we all looked at him and said, this guy's got something special that it's coming. And once again, you look at people sometimes and you go, wow, that is an amazing, amazing athlete. You know, and sometimes they just walk out on stage and you go, today's really their day. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it at the Nationals. I've seen it. People walk out on stage and I go, okay, this is just her day. Sophia did it at the North Americans, where she walked out in the tall class, and it was like, this is a slam dunk for her today. That was my opinion when she walked out. And when we compared her, it didn't change. Janelle did it at the Junior Nationals. She walked out and I went, today's just her day. This is just the way she looks today. Is just, there's nobody on this stage that's close. And once again, we never can control who else shows up on stage. So therefore, you have to be that person who brings your best that day. And sometimes it's just overpowering. And that's the easy part when you're a judge, is when you go, wow, that person has just really owned that stage today. They did their job. I go, and like I said, it could be a one-day thing, or it could be that person now has moving on to, you know, win the Olympia, you know, 5 times in a row. But you do remember the special athletes. You always do. And I've said that to multiple athletes over the years. Someone will say, oh, you remember me? And I'll go, of course I do. And I'll name the show that I remember judging them at. And I'll go, you don't forget the good ones. I say stuff like that all the time. Because you don't forget great athletes. You just don't. The sport is, you know, obviously your brain starts to fill up with great physiques. And I go, sometimes it's amazing what the body can do. And you don't forget. So at least I don't. I go, I don't forget. Someone's really good. Oh no, I remember. And what's even better is when they're really good and then they get better and they get better. And like I said, that's what you want for people. You want them to achieve the maximum potential they can have. So for me, like I say, I go, it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch people do well. And you're right. You don't forget the great ones. You just don't. And I've seen a lot over the years. I go, it's amazing what the human body can do.
It's so amazing. And I remember when you were giving me my feedback at the Boss Bodies retreat, which I'm so grateful for, you really emphasize being patient and knowing that there is always room to grow. And you had mentioned to me that I have room to grow a lot, and I'm not going to go over all the feedback, but
No. I'm actually thinking about it right now in my mind, but go ahead. Keep going.
Are you?
Of course I am. Well, I remember these times, the great thing about that retreat, once again, I don't mean to gush on anything, but I go, when I left that retreat, what I felt was, okay, there are 50 competitive athletes in this room. Every one of them's at a different point in their journey. Every one of them really wants to get better, whether it was individual posing, whether it was, the time we took to go over photos, whether it was the time we talked about, anything during that retreat. And I feel that's so important to have moments like that where we get to spend that time together. And of course, I remember what I told you. And I remember looking at your, I know your physique very well. And I go, I know what you have to do. And I go, once again, patience is a key word, because if you have to bring your upper body up, or you have to bring this up, or you have to bring that, guess what? It ain't going to happen in, like I said, 3 minutes. You've got to give it the hard work and dedication that goes with it. So once again, I think that sitting with people, talking to people, it's so important, because it gives us all energy. The energy we need to be better is not something that is, it's not something we do by ourselves. So we have to have support. So whether the support comes from the organization, or from judges, or from trainers, or from, friends, or training partners, family, I go, it has to be channeled the right way. And I think, like I said, going through that whole retreat and talking to everybody, it was so much fun doing that. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't trade that for anything, because I go, that was time well spent for me. So yeah. So like I said, I go, I'm just over here rambling on and trying to keep this thing short, so you don't have a 3-hour interview on your hands where people go, I don't want to listen to this thing, or you have to break it into parts. You might have to do that.
No, it's so great. I actually get feedback on, like, a lot of times when I do longer episodes, people are like, oh my God, that was amazing, because it got me through like 3 cardio sessions. I'm like, good. And I think it's nice to just have the genuine discussion. And when talking in this way, where it is just from the heart, and it's like what needs to be shared, or it's what needs to be said in this moment. And I think I'm personally learning a lot, even after we've already talked and I already heard you speak at Boss Bodies. Like, you just have